and here's the thing, and I've told Joseph this too. I know people who like this show, like genuinely like this show. Great. As far as adaptations are concerned, this is not the worst thing I've seen recently. There's a whole plethora of terrible adaptations that have come out. It's not. I guess, is it okay for me to say, like, this just isn't my Last of Us?
Yes.
Like, this wasn't made
I
for
think
me.
so.
You know what I mean?
It almost feels like this is made for people who have never played the game.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
well,
dude. Oh, keep going.
so I kept noticing throughout this episode, and I've noticed it throughout most of the show, but this episode it seemed to kind of like drive it home. They they keep in these like minor details about things that don't matter, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that they don't matter, but they're just like tiny little things that happened in the game that you could have missed, like the Starlight comics,
Uh-huh.
and a couple of the other things that they've kind of kept in that are just like kind of like nods to the game player. But then they go and they change these like fundamental story plots, and it just doesn't make sense to me how you can be like, hey, let's keep this tiny little thing in, but this big part of the story that was like really really instrumental in how the story progresses, we're going to make such a pivotal change to it that it we might still get there, but it's going to look different how we get there.
Yeah. And I don't know if you noticed this, but they've turned they are now, because it's made clear in this episode, I think, even though it was obvious before, but it's like they just outright say it. They're like, Ellie has anger issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they are pushing really hard to make her already the thing that she's supposed to be for what I'm assuming is going to be the next season. So until we find out for sure, I'm just going to say the next season, as in The Last of Us Part 2.
The big problem I have is I cannot see Bella Ramsey be that person.
Neither can I. Dude, she's what, 5'1"?
Yeah.
And I mean, like, Ellie wasn't exactly big, but she was definitely at least portrayed as being more capable in the game, even if some of that may not be the most realistic. And it's so funny, dude. We got we get comments about this all the time where they're like, well, it's in their world, it's not real. It's like, this is a common complaint that you see whenever you decide to criticize a piece of media, as if there aren't rules that exist in that world. You know, it's the okay. So one of my favorites that I heard, this wasn't specifically towards us, but it was about the Glass Onion.
Yep.
And not that anybody in the troll room cares, but in the Glass Onion, there's a part where one of the main characters gets shot by a 45, and a thin journal stops the bullet from killing her.
Yep.
And a lot of people complained about it. And the amount of like cope that you tend to see with these kind of things, where instead of being like, yeah, that was a terrible idea, that should have killed her, and just being like, okay, I can agree that was a mistake. You know, it's a simple thing. I saw people saying stuff like, well, maybe the journal had a metal lining on the inside. What was one of the other ones? Just anything like, oh, the bullet. Man, what was the other one? I know there were some other ones, but it's stuff like that where it's like rules are established. It's like in The Last of Us, bullets work the same way bullets do in reality. This show is supposed to be pretty grounded for the most part. At least that's the idea that they're getting across. And so when people come in and they're like, well, it's not actually the real world, and I'm like, right, but they live in a world that is based on our world.
Right.
So logic and these things still have to apply. It's like I was saying last week. Like I don't know how you felt about the opening from last week with the couple that was in the cabin.
So I think that the actor in that was a national treasure. Right. I think he's a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
The scene kind of played off well, but it just felt like, I don't know, kind of felt worthless.
I was trying to figure out how that lady was as big as she was, living off of deer and rabbits for
Yeah.
20 years.
But then again, he had a deer, he had 2 rabbits. Who knows what? I mean, they're also eating a lot of canned food, and maybe he's getting some her. She likes her Chef Boyardee. Leave her be.
Maybe they have maybe they have a stash that nobody knows about. But yeah, it's some odd stuff about the show that I pick up on. I think this episode in particular was, if there was stuff there, it was a lot harder for me to recognize. The thing that still bugs me, though, is that this is 20 years past essentially the fall of humanity, and there's still some modern conveniences that they have, and I'm like, okay, so for instance, where is Ellie getting batteries for her Walkman?
Right. Who's producing these?
Yeah, who she has this thing. She's in their version of like Fedra gym class wearing this thing. And I'm just like, is Fedra cool? Are they just like giving her like a battery allowance to to keep her in line? It's just, I know it's small stuff, and as we say here all the time, nitpicks are totally fine. I think that you should be able to look at the details of something and be like, this seems off. Like, why was this choice made? And so that was really one of the only ones for this episode. I think for the most part, everything else makes sense.
I had one part towards the end of the episode that kind of threw me off, but I mean, it had to happen for the episode to end.
Yeah.
So
so we can just kind of pick up here. So you were correct when you said that you thought that this was going to be essentially bookended by a scene with Joel and Ellie. I kind of wish they hadn't done it, especially at the end. I don't know if that, and we'll get to the end of what is the end of the episode essentially, but the whole thing where like at the very end they decide to hop back and forth. Like, I get what they were doing with that, because I think they were trying to show, they're trying to get across this idea that how much like Joel means to Ellie in the way that Riley meant to Ellie.
Yeah.
And she wants to do whatever she can to like make sure that he's okay. Totally get it. I just, it kind of was jarring to me. And then like they went back into the flashback and then back into to the modern setting. I was just like, I don't know, man. It was just a bit much for me at the end of that. And I'm like, I feel like you're giving up sort of the poignant moment of the difference between Riley and Ellie at the end of the episode, which we'll get to. Right. I don't want to get too much into it now, but that was just something that kind of I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Just from a creative decision, it was maybe not my favorite.
And I agree. It really wasn't for me to open the episode kind of letting you know. And yeah, it took a minute or two to get to it, but to let you know Joel was alive still.
Yeah.
Because in the game, you don't know he's alive until after a good hour worth of gameplay when it switches over to Ellie by herself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just felt like, to create the suspense, to create some tension in the episode, if they had somehow kind of rearranged it a little bit to do that, it would have just seemed like it would have told a little bit of a better story. Like I didn't really mind the jumping back and forth thing. It just was like you get 2 minutes of Joel and Ellie, and then 50 minutes of her and Riley, back to 2 minutes of Joel and Ellie.
Yeah.
If they had spread this out over 2 episodes, it might have been able to just kind of like interspace with the other stuff going on a little bit better. Because now we're going to get one whole episode of trying to rush through this next part of the story, which, again, based on the preview, that it could or couldn't be changed. How it's going to play out. So
yeah,
a lot of it look like they're going to keep the same story elements, just the people will be different.
Yeah, I'm not, man. I don't know, man. They're getting to the point now, like with what they're doing with David and them now being a religious cult. I'm just kind of wondering what he's got planned for how they're changing the ending.
Yeah, because that. Oh man, that's still one of my most shocking moments of the first game.
Yeah, and the thing that's going to be so weird, and it's already happening, and I was talking to some people in the Discord about this a couple days ago, but there's now this resurgence of people who are like adamantly defending or have really bad takes about the first and second game, and now I'm sitting here thinking what they're gonna do is, because I'm trying to, for the most part, I don't know if Joseph's looked into it at all, but I've been trying to keep him away from like what happens, because I want him to go in mostly fresh to it. And it sucks because I actually think he probably would enjoy the story from the games a little bit more, or excuse me, from the first game. He knows basically what happens in the second one. But I'm wondering if we're going to start seeing like a lot of people coming out and defending the show for whatever reason. Now, I'm wondering if they're even going to be like, I'm adamant that there's no way, if they decide to change Joel's decision, or like what would you call it? His reasoning behind what he's doing.
Right.
If they decide to like take that in a different direction, I think you're going to start seeing this whole thing where people are going to be like, well, no, it was better in the game versus it wasn't. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Like, I'm not ready. Like, I'm not ready for people to be telling me that, oh, dude, one of the worst takes that I heard, this guy said, if you think that the story in The Last of Us 2 is bad, you obviously haven't played the game. He was dead serious. No idea who this guy was. It came off as if he was some sort of like games journalist, and I know like Troll Room, you know how that tends to go, but it was very weird, and I'm like, where are these people now coming from?
Right. I saw one recently that was like just a thumbnail that was like, is The Last of Us 2 actually a masterpiece?
Oh yeah,
and I'm like,
yep,
that
stuff's popping up again, man.
I'm like, nope, not doing it.
No, it's not.
I started playing it again after I beat the first one,
Yeah.
the remake, or the new version, the updated version,
the remake remaster.
Yeah, the remaster remake, and I started playing it, and the only thing that holds that game together is the gameplay. The gameplay in that game is great. Like especially if you play it on grounded mode,
Yeah.
then you get pretty decent at it. It's really, really fun gameplay. But the story, I just skipped through all the cutscenes. I don't even want to watch the story. I don't care.
So long.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like the gameplay. I'm not super fond of it. I beat the campaign for Hogwarts Legacy. The story in that is trash. I wasn't expecting a whole lot. By the end, I was skipping through like dialogue. I was like, guys, can we just? I want to just get through this. Combat's pretty fun. That's a conversation for another time. But now my goal is to play through part 1 and part 2. I just have to buy part 1, and I'm gonna do streams because I think I can probably beat part 1 in about 2 or 3 streams, and then spend a little more time with part 2, mostly so that I can build up a very strong argument for why it's not good. So that when the people come and they're like, but my themes, because that's what people talk about all the time with Last of Us 2. They're like, yeah, but the theme of this. I was like, but it's stupid. The story's contrived. Joel is like completely changed to make a massive mistake at the beginning that sets the whole thing in motion. It's like there's no way that like these women who are pregnant would ever be allowed near combat zones when the world is like, you know, there aren't that many people left. Like there's all of this stuff that's like in there that you're like, do y'all not understand how these logical things they just don't make sense? It's just it's so weird that this stuff would be the case, and that's why I need to go back through it, because I only have vague memories of certain things that happen in it, and then some of the major points in it that are not great.
My vague memory of the story is that it goes on forever. Like it is just, it continues and continues and continues. It's like Return of the King.
Yeah.
But the cut-ins of the continuation of the endings are not good.
Yeah. And then like the whole thing where you're playing as and I know we're supposed to be talking about episode 7, but I can't help myself. The whole thing where like you start playing as Abby, and you're now fighting Ellie, and you're like, but I don't want to beat Ellie.
Can I tell you a secret? I totally let Ellie kill me multiple times because Abby's deaths in that are amazing. When you die, when Ellie gets to kill, there's like 4 or 5 different ways Ellie can kill you, and they feel so cathartic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't know, man. Like, it was one of those things that it took me a while after beating The Last of Us 2 to get there. Something was like off about it from the beginning,
Hmm.
but I couldn't quite tell you what. And that just happens sometimes. I think sometimes, and this is something I think should happen more often in these kind of conversations, is that you actually listen to the arguments people are making and you spend some time like chewing on it and you go, "Oh, yeah, that was pretty dumb." You know?
Hmm.
And the game's pretty emotionally manipulative. Though I'll admit the dog I was okay with, because I had never, from what I know, I'd never really seen it before, but I did like on a small level in The Last of Us 2 that they were trying to go for this idea that this other group is just another group trying to survive. It's pretty typical. I mean, it's nothing like extraordinary, but one of the things I did like is that, and I know it's emotionally manipulative, but like you're playing with the dogs, and then it's the same dogs that you're like slaughtering at other points
Yep.
during the game. I was like, okay, like I see what you're doing here. But it's, it's stuff like that. It's stuff where like people were like praising it because you'd hear someone like call out like, "Oh no, she killed Kevin," but like you kill
Yep.
Kevin like 30 times, and you're like, all right, too much. Like, calm down. And it's that stuff never went as far. It's just like, ooh, isn't it like kind of edgy the way that he cries out for like someone? But it's like, yeah, but it's kind of the same thing over and over again, and after a while, it loses that luster.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't so into it. But that again is another topic. So we are we get this flashback of Ellie, and it's her and
Captain Kwong.
Captain Kwong. It's fine. It's not funny. I don't know why I thought that was so funny. You had some notes about this, right?
Yeah, because it was at the very time. So
Yeah.
in this scene, as we're watching it, Ellie has gotten in trouble for putting some girl in the infirmary for punching her, and you find out she's already been put in the hole 3 times, right? As a 13-year-old ish. So she's
Yeah.
obviously a troublemaker. So this guy goes on this rant about how she's so smart and she could do this, and that Fedra's the only thing holding everything together, and she has the opportunity, she could be an officer and actually live like a decent life, and all of this. And so my note was, do you think he actually bought his BS that he was feeding her about Fedra and being the only thing holding it all together? Or
Yeah.
do you think he's actually like a secret scumbag like the rest of Fedra?
I'm gonna say, just because of based on what we have, that he does believe it. He looks like it's almost like they were going for a pencil pusher thing with this guy,
Yeah.
where he's like, stay in line and look, you can be like me.
Yep.
And the reason I say that is because Riley is the opposition to this.
Yep.
Because she gives because Ellie does believe a lot of this. And it's actually one of the things that I appreciated about this episode is that you get to see the difference between Ellie and Riley in this, and that they are
Yep.
now essentially on different sides of this conflict. And that maybe each side has decent points that they're making. The problem is that Fedra is slinging people up and killing what a lot of people are saying are innocent people, and then
Right.
the Fireflies are terrorists.
Yep.
And that they are potentially also killing innocent people indiscriminately. And so I appreciate that. I think that it's solid. I don't have any issue with that. I think it's something that you do kind of get in the game as well, where it's like no one is exactly correct in their thinking. Everyone is just trying to survive in their own way.
So one of the things that he said was that if there was no Fedra, the QZ would starve and start killing themselves within days. And I think that's an interesting juxtaposition to kind of how things were happening in Kansas City.
Uh-huh.
Now, don't get me wrong, like they painted that Fedra as being like exceptionally bad.
Yeah.
But when they were gone, their leaders just started doing this. It's basically like Fedra was just replaced by the civilians doing the same thing Fedra was doing.
Uh-huh. and it's unfortunately it's something I don't think that in the show they hit on hard enough, that it was basically one totalitarian government being taken over by another.
Yep.
They both were doing awful things. And in the game, there's some notes that come up that explain that the government that took over was even worse. And I think it was in one of the behind-the-scenes things that they were trying to explain that for the show, but it just didn't come across quite like that.
Right.
And unfortunately, I tend to fall on the side of it that the people who took over were just a little too incompetent, because their leader ultimately, and I get what they were kind of doing for the story, and that they were trying to do this whole thing where it's like your revenge. Oh God, themes. Listen to this theme, because this should sound familiar to you. That revenge ultimately can destroy everything that you've tried to build up in your life. Sound familiar?
It actually sounds kind of familiar to me. Like I've played that.
Played a 40-hour game dealing with that. Yeah. So I'm still not a big fan of that. I just man. Anyway, yeah, I think that this episode does a pretty good job doing that, and this is the kind of stuff that in the show, it's the things that I like. I was always fine with the idea that they were going to try to do some world building that took stuff from notes, took stuff from little bits of things that we actually got to see, especially in the first game, and broaden them. I think my biggest criticism is usually that I just don't typically like the way they tried to broaden some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't. It doesn't always make sense for the world that I assumed in the game that they were living in, and what I see from the game, and how like violent it is, and how miserable it can be for people. Whereas in this, it's sort of like some of these people, and I guess for like Lieutenant Kwong, I'm okay with there being some people in the world that it's like they're kind of just going through their day-to-day life. And can't remember if it's him or Riley that makes this point. Actually, it might be Riley, where she's like, Yulin. Oh no, maybe it's him, where he's like, you could end up on like watch duty or whatever they called it, and you'll just get drunk one day and fall off the wall, or
right.
This terrible thing will happen to you, or this terrible thing will happen to you. So it's cool that they have some of that, and so you kind of get to see some of Fedra from that perspective, which isn't something you really get to see in the first game. They are just
right.
sort of like totalitarian, military, dictatorish type people. There's not a lot of depth to them, and so getting to see a little bit more of that, I don't really mind in this. So
with the occasional junkie on the side who's buying pills from the local smuggler.
Yeah, and that stuff makes a lot of sense, that in this world that someone in one of those positions would try to take advantage of his position.
He might have been the guy who took his pills, got drunk, and fell off the side of the wall.
No,
who knows?
He's not, though, because he's the guy that.
No. It was the thing that Captain Kwong said was one of the things that you'd get drunk and fall off a wall. Well,
that guy, that guy up there kind of did. Honestly, dude, it kind of would have been almost more poignant if she had come across like a Fedra agent who had done that, and it wasn't just like a random dude. I mean, it still works, but it could have been interesting where it's like, oh dang, like Kwon was right about that. That's like, and that gives Ellie this idea, and they don't. I'm pretty sure in the game, in the DLC, I might just be misremembering this, but I think Ellie basically decides not to go back after what happened to Riley, right?
I think you're right. She can't go back because they would see the. I mean, I don't know if we're jumping too far, but they would see the bite on her arm,
right?
She would get checked at some point. So I don't think in the DLC she goes back, but I don't know how quickly she joins up with Marlene.
Yeah. I'd have to I'd have to go back and play the DLC, and to be honest, the Left Behind DLC, it was like super praised at the time. I always thought it was just kind of fine.
Right.
I was like, I like the story well enough, and I like the relationship with her and Riley in the game. I like Riley in this.
Yeah, I thought Storm Reed did a really good job. As a matter of fact, as you're about to see her for the first time,
this,
she's not. I had written on my notes that she looked like she was like a spitting image of the game character.
it's quite close.
Yeah, and then I kind of saw some clips from the game today and realized it's not quite there, but
Yeah.
she did a really good job portraying that character. And I just she's not a problem. She held up really well to Bella Ramsey's acting abilities, so
yeah. I see. So here's the thing: it's like Bella Ramsey like bothers me, just as an actress. Like, there's just something that I'm not into seeing her on screen.
Yeah.
I don't find her endearing or like likable.
I definitely don't find her likable, and Ellie was likable in the game.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, Ellie in the show, her big problem is her language, right? Because I think her language is a detriment to her character. And she kind of loses the nuance of the character and just seems to come across as really crass.
And there's a part in here when they climb out of here where it's like just over and over and over again. And I was like, who wrote that? Like, who wrote this? There's a part from that Blood Origin, that Witcher
Blood and Wine.
No, not Blood and Wine. It's
the TV show. Sorry,
the quote unquote prequel that I pulled up when we were reviewing it a while back, where the dwarf or someone in it is just like, what the fuck, like, just over and over again, and I was like, what? Who wrote this dialogue?
Right.
There are moments where Ellie feels like that to me. It's almost like one for one, where you're like, I understand that you're kind of this like kid of the system, and you didn't grow up in the best way, but it just goes too far sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it was the dwarf in the Blood Origin thing at least supposed to be Scottish?
I don't remember. I don't even think it was the dwarf. I think she went to an elf community and the elves were just going crazy, and I was just like, I don't know why you're talking like. It was really bad dialogue.
Yeah, that's dumb.
So yeah, they sneak out of her dorm, I guess, for a lack of a better way of talking about it. And they go through this thing. They find a dead body and steal the alcohol from him. Did you have a note about the bottle?
So I wrote, as I was watching this, haha, dead body jump scare.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just miraculously decided that was the part of the floor it wanted to fall through.
I think I can actually show this. So it's like,
yeah,
just very weird. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I guess you can be like, oh, suspension of disbelief, but it's like, that was a very convenient moment for that to fall through the floor.
But yeah, so they in a second, when they get to their next part, they drink out of that bottle.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, obviously they saw the guy had pills right there, which lo and behold looked exactly like a baggie he may or may not have bought from Joel.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, that's clever.
So they drink out of this bottle. They're having to make the assumption at this point, because all they do is sniff it like they're both bourbon alcohol connoisseurs, that there was nothing wrong with this alcohol.
Yeah.
That could have been what killed him.
It could have been. There could have been cordyceps in the bottle.
Right.
We don't.
I mean,
I guess
they're just like, yeah,
on, but yeah.
Yeah, let's just drink this stuff. I mean, that could have been methyl instead of ethyl, and they both went blind. Like.
He could have been infected with the cordyceps, decided to go out with pills and alcohol, and there was infection in the bottle from him, and Riley would have ended it right there. But I'm okay with it for just the whole thing.
I believe in the game there's a character that the two of them reference. I can't remember his name, but he's an older Fedra soldier who they befriend.
Okay.
And so they get to the mall and there's an old Fedra area, and he had died recently or something, right? I don't remember exactly what happened to him. But they get the bottle from him, so in the game it's safe.
Yeah.
This just felt kind of careless, but
I agreed.
Suspension of disbelief.
Yeah. we'll chalk it up to that. We could spend forever talking about this bottle of alcohol. So this is the part where she finds out that Riley's in the Fireflies.
Yep.
And she gets the story. Again, this is all pretty much from the game.
Yep.
Just done a little differently, right? Because don't you basically start out? Are they running across rooftops at the beginning of that DLC? I honestly don't remember.
I definitely don't remember any part of the Fedra school.
Okay.
I don't remember if Riley wakes her up and they leave from the school.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of like they were already almost to where they were going, possibly, but I don't remember.
So she tells her she's got the surprise, and they end up going to the mall. She sneaks in. Now, one of the things that I had thought about with this, there's a lot of neon lights in this episode.
Yep.
And I realized that the saturation on my PC monitor might be a little high because every time they were in an area like this, it looked like they had lipstick on. And I was looking at another one of my monitors because I watch on one and record on a different one. And I was looking at that monitor, and I was like, well, it doesn't look as saturated there. So I always have to watch out for that because sometimes I'm like, oh man, who did the color correction on this? And I realize, I need to change my monitor settings a little bit. It happens. But
so this was the point in the episode where I started realizing I'm actually been really impressed with the music in the show overall. Like I felt like they've not only done a good job putting pop culture songs and songs like real songs into things, but the dude that plays the guitar for a lot of the stuff, Gustavo Santaola, I think is they've just done a great job of using his guitar playing as filler in the show, and it just seems to like really kind of fit in with everything. And I had written down, it was like right here he was playing the guitar or something, and it was good. It just felt good. I liked it.
Do you buy this whole no one can see anything going on in the mall thing?
Oh, look at the atrium, man. That thing looks like it's going to shoot straight up into the clouds, and the clouds are going to turn neon pink.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It is very neon pink. The color palette in this episode specifically, they were going hard on some of this.
It's really funny because I've got YouTube pulled up on one screen, and then I've got your screen pulled up on the other that you're sharing.
Yeah.
And the color difference between the two is crazy. Like on my screen, this big G-Sync 32-inch monitor, high, like the kind of probably similar to what you're happening with your saturation. Mine's like super saturated, and then your screen sharing is not doing that.
Yeah, you lose a little bit of that in like transfer.
So did you also notice when they were going down the escalator, the song that was playing? Do you remember?
Is it Take on Me?
Yep. And so 80s song. Trouble. Remember the code? If it was an 80s song.
Oh, is that interesting? So that was the same.
Who knows if that mattered? She also had the cassette for that band back at her dorm. But I saw as soon as I heard, I'm like, that's an 80s song. Okay, well, there's gonna be trouble.
Yeah.
And they have seemed to kind of throw little things like that in the show.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, listen, I always like in anything that that stuff is cool. The thing that always drives me crazy is when someone will talk about something that isn't very good.
Right.
And they're like, but did you know about the Easter egg? And you're just like, no, I don't care.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like the Mortal Kombat 2 poster that was in Ellie's room back at the dorm. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Well,
I'm not, I'm not
she has like that's referenced earlier on in the show too, because she has like
right,
an affinity for that because it wasn't whatever the game was that was in the actual Last of Us game. They obviously it wasn't a real thing, and
right.
they didn't have a license, I guess, to put Mortal Kombat 2 in the game originally. So I thought it was a decent replacement. And she talked about how I think that's one of those moments where she brings up Riley, right? Where she's like, "Oh, a friend of mine was obsessed with this, or was like really
Right.
good at this game," and she was because they've had those little hints throughout the show that about Riley, essentially, this person that she knew before something happened to her.
That was actually an interesting thing in the game when they would reference her and say
Yeah,
that she was good at that game or my friend loved that game. Because when you actually get to that part in the DLC and they play the game's broken,
yeah,
and so they don't actually get to play it. She just narrates it for her.
yeah. And
So which is actually kind of a cool thing in the game. I actually like that part. Um, yeah.
so
Anyway,
they go through all the shops, and honestly, I think this is where it comes. I've been sorry, this is what I'm trying to say. I've been going back and forth since the beginning of the show about whether the way Ellie is written isn't very good or if it's Bella Ramsey's portrayal. And I
hmm
honestly, I'm like at that 50-50 at this point. I think it's kind of both. They're like the escalator part where they're, she's telling her, oh, there's like 4 wonders of the mall or whatever that she's going to take her to. And she's like, oh, is this escalator one of them? She gets like, oh, like I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because Bella Ramsey's like 19-ish and she's
yeah.
trying to portray this kid and it just doesn't, it comes off wrong to me. And I don't, honestly, I'm sorry. I don't know the best way to explain this. But her whole portrayal of being this younger person who hasn't seen a whole lot and is now being taken. So it's just been done better in other things. The sort of like fish out of
Mhm.
water scenario.
Yeah.
I,
No, I agree, 100%.
I think it's just both because she was like running up and thing, and I was like, why do I find you so annoying?
And Riley was even kind of looking at her like you're being annoying right now,
Yeah.
and maybe you could, because this is the scene right here where they're looking at the Victoria's Secret, and then after Riley walks away, she fixes her hair and tries to like make herself look a little bit nicer
Uh huh.
in the mirror. So maybe she's acting awkward because
She likes Riley.
yeah,
Yeah.
because she likes Riley, and if that's the case, fine. But it's one of those things where you can't tell. I can't tell if she's just being awkward or if she's like being a fake actor, right? Like
Uh
you can
huh.
tell she's acting, one of those things. So I don't know.
And man, I don't know how old Ashley Johnson was when she did the voice acting for Ellie. Um, so I guess to some degree, the only thing, as if I can like kind of steel man for the show a little bit, is that you do have a younger actress trying to take on a role that maybe she just doesn't have the chops for. Like her only other role was as Lady Mormont
Right. And she looked like she was like 8
in that,
and
yeah.
yeah.
And I
So
guess
Ashley Johnson is currently 39 years old, which means
so
that
she
in
was, yeah,
2013 she was 30.
yeah,
But again, you're talking all it is a voice put to CGI.
yeah.
So you can make your voice sound what you want, but you've
Mhm.
got when you're acting, it's a lot harder.
And there's certain things about inflection, and I think it's why you see with certain actors, whether voice actors or not, there's a certain maturity to the roles that they can bring, and she did and I mean that in the sense that like she, for whatever reason, was able to embody even just with her voice like this character of Ellie.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe it is that I'm just not into the way that they're portraying Ellie in this. And that maybe it's just because up to this point, like Bella Ramsey really hasn't been that likable.
No.
And so it's like I don't like this character enough to really like care about that, which is really funny because I was thinking about this too, and I can't remember who I sent this to because I've been texting a couple people about this episode, but I was like, man, it's too bad Riley wasn't the one that was immune to the infection. She's just I don't know, she's kind of a more interesting character as far as this is concerned, and I think this whole thing is supposed to be a major moment for Ellie, and I guess it is. I don't want to say it's not. I don't. It's very hard for me to put into words currently why all of this stuff with Bella Ramsey's version of Ellie just is not working. It's almost like all the pieces are there, but the heart, if you will, which I know that's such a subjective, like weird, like woo-woo kind of thing to say, but it's like, it's almost like there's like this core element that is missing from her portrayal of Ellie, and I don't know.
Like I can't put my finger on it either, but I'm with you. I think she's probably a good actress, but I think she's trying too hard. And I also think that part of it's the way that she's written to just be this like angry, tough exterior person who, like, again, there's no nuance to the character. The few times you've seen her get vulnerable, she ruins it with like a Marvel, type thing where it's like, this is a vulnerable moment. Let's tell a stupid joke.
And that could be fine if that's her putting up a defense.
Right.
So she's like legitimately terrified, and I guess they kind of get that across in the previous episode because that's that whole conversation with Joel.
Yep.
Where she's like, "You're the person that I trust you. Like I don't like I want." Like they have that like heart to heart or whatever. That again was okay. That's the one after Joel was like sobbing to Tommy. Yeah.
His video game, Joel would have cried.
I just thought it was overdone. But again, yeah, I'm biased because I'm looking at it from I like Joel from the game, from the first game.
The menace.
So, there are moments where like I go up to kind of a neutral stance with Bella Ramsey. There are moments that I'm like, okay, she's fine here. Like this, there's nothing wrong with her portrayal. It's just there are other moments where I'm like, I'm not really into this.
Yeah. The carousel scene was good. Actually, I thought that was fine.
Yeah, them drinking on it, trying to be teenagers or whatever. This is the kind of stuff that like is good. And again, I think would actually be a little more poignant if the show was a little darker, a little more brutal. And
a little more action.
Just, it had that heaviness to it. And then so you have these moments where you're like, oh, here's a moment of these two teenagers sitting on a carousel that, one of them snuck out of school essentially, and, they're drinking booze. It's cool. Like people can kind of relate to that. And that's great. You get a moment like that, but it just, I don't know. The show's been so kind of in the middle for me. It just, everything, the moments like this don't quite hit. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Do they not hit because of the missing action? It just seems like a lot more of this like kind of like slow, not character building, because there's nothing wrong with good character building, but like
this is more of a drama with with trimming of zombies.
And you had the drama in the game, but you also had these like scenes where you're killing like 20 guys and like brutally murdering them in between that kind of stuff. So you had the action, but that action, it wasn't just like a regular first person shooter, shoot 'em up, didn't matter. There was danger to it.
Yeah, and the combat in the first game in particular, and I guess you could argue in the second game, but more so for the first one, it was part of the storytelling. And we talked about it a little bit, how they changed the whole like gun running thing. They changed the whole thing with the guy who betrays them and sells the guns to the Fireflies.
Yep.
And I remember, I have honestly, it's just one of those things that's like seared into my brain. I remember the first time I choked a guy out in The Last of Us. And I
Oh,
was like,
I'm glad you finished that.
Yeah, it yeah. Well, jujitsu that too. But in The Last of Us, it was unlike anything I'd seen up to that. I mean, at that time, Naughty Dog was the team that made the Uncharted series, which are these very like pulpy Indiana Jones action adventure games where everyone just joked about Drake being a mass murderer because that's the way that the gameplay had to work. But then you go to this, which is a much more grounded game. You're Joel, and especially the first time you play it, you're like, I don't really know what's going on here. I know that there's like a girl involved, and you get into that first scenario, and then the first time you choke a dude, and like he's struggling, and he's like grabbing on, you're like, oh, I know what I'm getting into now.
Yep.
I might argue that you don't get that from the show.
No. I mean, we had to get to episode 6 to see our first choke out.
Yeah, and the stuff with Sarah is kind of on point. Like, you kind of have this idea of like, oh man, this game is gonna be pretty dark. Like, this is going places. Like, they're not holding back the fact. It's like, oh, his young daughter is dead.
Right.
So you have that moment, but I just, man, that for whatever reason, that specific part of the game is the kind of that moment that I was like, oh, okay, like he's not a good dude. Like, and they intentionally do this thing where like these people are struggling because you're choking them to death.
Right.
That was kind of that, and I just, there are like moments of it in this. The stuff with Henry and Sam, I think, is pretty strong. Even some of the stuff with the infected in the episode in Kansas City, the second one. Well, I guess it's the same thing as Henry and Sam. So like that whole second episode that's with them, there's a lot of that element in there, but then a lot of the other stuff that we've gotten, it's like, it's kind of there, but and maybe I'm like jaded from like Game of Thrones and seeing people's heads like pop like balloons and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like desensitized a little bit. But it's something I've been bringing up to Joseph since we started these reviews, where I'm like, one of the things that definitely seems off to me is the balance between the drama, the action, and the dark nature of the world that they live in. And so when you have a scene like this where it's a quiet moment between the two of them and they're drinking on the carousel, it doesn't hit as hard because a lot of the other shows kind of like this.
Yep.
There's a lot of this. A lot of it was in the last episode where they're just kind of going around. Like, we don't get much of anything happening or any like threat until the last like 5 minutes of episode 6.
There should not be an episode where there isn't some type of violent conflict. It's to some point, right? Sure. Whether it's against humans or whether it's against the infected. And if you don't have, and I guess every episode has kind of had something like that, but there should still be infected in every episode. And this world has seemed rather empty to me as they've built this world out in the TV show. It didn't feel empty in the game. It just feels like they've gone across half the country and haven't ran into anything.
Yeah, it's like that. Yep. That there's a big part of that in the previous episode where it's like they're walking through the wilderness and you're like, where is the danger?
Yeah.
Is it just this isolated out here? I mean, I guess, but those guys were saying that is like the people they run into were saying like, oh yeah, there's like the Death River or whatever.
Yeah, the River of Death.
and it was like, so that was all just kind of like made up because of the people in the town. And I'm like, so are they like actually dangerous? What's going on here? Because to be honest, I'm not sure I got that vibe from them in the game either.
No.
No. And in the second game, they're just idiots.
Yep.
Well, they're communists, so.
Are they though?
No, I mean, dude, that was one of the things I said last week. I was like, please, someone, give me a well thought out, like, just write it in the comments, like, how are they actually communists? And no one ever said anything. We got some guy that was like mad about something, and then was saying like, oh, they don't have like an economic system or whatever because there's no money. And I was like, do you think that economics is just like fiat currency? He never responded. But I was like, it's like, you say that from the, he's like, you understand that they were like bartering and trade. Like,
I was gonna say, does that mean every barter and trade civilization that's ever existed were communists? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's like, did they not have economies? Like, it's so weird. Yeah, you get really dumb comments from people sometimes. And I said to the guy, I was like, we're not above criticism, but we are above this criticism. Oh man. But yeah, so they go through the photo booth stuff, which was from the game. We get more of this pink and purple neon glow, which I guess it works for this. I mean, this is basically what it was like in one of these things.
In 2003, maybe in the 90s.
No, it's still kind of like this.
I mean, when was the last time you've been to a mall in general? But
good point.
It looks like the mall from Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Is what it looks like.
They're definitely places that was the case.
True.
With the neon lights or whatever. And like 2003 is not that far from the 90s. You know, there was always that like carryover. Stuff didn't die immediately the second the 90s was over.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
The only thing, and again, this is more of a like, I'm willing to go with the suspension of disbelief argument in this. You should be aware of this because you've been to the local retrocade that we have in town.
Yep.
Most of these machines would not be working 20 years after this.
Oh God. And that was so I have two criticisms for the rest of this episode. And one of them is the fact that every single one of those games looks like it's working. Every single one. 20 years later, after probably not even being turned on for 10 years, at a minimum, since the last Fedra agent was in there playing some video games, like.
Yeah, and we just. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was just saying they fail.
Yeah, they fall apart. They're all like CRT screens. Arcade machines are pretty notorious for needing upkeep for a long period of time.
Yep.
You'd think Neil Druckmann would know that. And I would be all right. What would have been cool as just like a nod to that. And again, talking about like suspension of disbelief. If Riley had been like, oh yeah, well she's like, I've been here, because I think she mentions to her before you find out that she's like posted there by the Fireflies. She's like, yeah, I've been here a few times. She's like, all the machines here aren't working, but there is one that's working and it's awesome. And then you get the whole thing with like the Mortal Kombat thing. So there's something kind of special to it. You're like, all right, I'm okay with this machine still working. And even if like they're like doing the whole thing and then the machine like shuts off on them, just like little things here and there where it's like, well, I guess that's the end of that. Because yeah, the show seems to have forgotten in many cases that we are 20 years into the future of this outbreak. And everything seems to work a little too easily for everyone in this show.
I know I should know this, but how long is it in the game? It's not 20 years.
I think it's 10.
That just makes so much more sense.
Yeah, and then I think in the DLC for the Left Behind DLC, I think you had said this, but like I think a lot of the machines were broken. Like a lot of stuff wasn't working because again, it's supposed to be like worn down. Like people haven't been here for a really long time.
I don't think anything was working.
Yeah,
there was like lights and some noises in there. She like got the lights to come on, but I don't think any of the games were working.
You may be right about that. That's something that we'll have to find out when I actually go back and stream these games. Anyway, the Mortal Kombat thing was fine. I get what they were doing, and I actually think it's again, they're for what they're trying to do and going for this like friendship between the two of them, and Ellie being like terrible and having no idea. And then it's kind of a cool moment because Riley's like, well, yeah, I've actually played this game. It's like we all know that person who would say that because I'm usually that person who's like,
yes, you are.
Like, yeah, I've played this a few times.
To everybody else, don't play Street Fighter with this guy.
I'm not even that good. Not anymore.
Whatever.
Oh man, I was always like middle of the road with that. There are some people out there that are so good at those games, it's frustrating. But
So
I appreciate it.
you're zooming into my other nitpick.
Oh, okay.
All right. So there's a dude here in the wall, little fun, he's kind of a fun guy.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help myself. So Riley's been there for however long she's been there. She's been playing video games. She's been making noise, turning lights on, blah, blah, blah. And tonight's the night this guy decides to wake up.
It's a little convenient. You're right.
Like, it just was. I don't remember. I can't. I've been trying since I watched this to remember where did the infected come from in the DLC. And I want to say that they were there. They were just like locked behind a door or something like that. And somehow something happened that they got through that door.
Yeah.
A big difference than just a single guy
who's just
waking
in
up
one of the shops and then just so happens to wake up this very night. Yeah. It would have been better, I think, if Riley had just overlooked a spot in the mall. Because she is like 15, 16, something like that.
Yep.
She's 16 because I think she said she was about to turn 17.
Yep.
Yeah, and that would make sense. A 16-year-old isn't exactly the most responsible, even in the apocalypse. It would have been easy enough that there was a spot that she didn't clear. It would have been easy enough that the Fireflies who had been posted there before weren't aware of it.
Right.
For one reason or another. Stuff to grade. I mean, there's so many different ways you could go about it besides, oh, he just happened to be in one of the stores and is waking up tonight. Just because, too, because I don't know if there's ever been a reason given for why the infected just all of a sudden just, it's like, oh, has he gestated enough on the wall? Like, I don't really understand.
Well, they do talk about at one point how the cordyceps have, like, if you step on it over here, they feel it over there.
Yeah, they could have done that.
Right. They could have like not realized there was a little runner of it and step on it somewhere.
Yeah. And so he's like, and it wakes him up.
Oh, Raiden. I just heard Raiden. Lightning bolt. Time to wake up. If she had just played Reptile or something, it wouldn't have been a big deal, but
yeah. I actually did like the nachos comment or the tacos comment. It's like I said, there are times where it's kind of on point, and I thought that Ellie's comment where it was, I think this is supposed to be the last wonder for her, and she's like, wait, is it tacos? Okay, not tacos. Like, she realized how stupid her statement was. I just liked that. I thought that worked really well. And then we get the origin for her joke book.
Yep.
Which, feel how you will about that. I didn't really care either way, to be honest.
So that also kind of tells me the answer about whether she goes back, because she only has this book. She doesn't have the first one.
Right.
So
yeah, she definitely doesn't. I knew she didn't. I just couldn't remember in the game if there was something that happened that just made her decide she wasn't going back. Maybe I guess maybe she sought out Marlene. They don't, obviously in this, they don't answer it. Like, Marlene just somehow now finds her.
Right.
And maybe we'll get like a flashback of that or something in the show at some point, but I don't know. At this point, I have no idea.
That's what telling a video game story in a television show should be about. Those type of things.
Yeah.
Things we didn't know from the video game.
I love too that Riley just like brings her into the room with all the pipe bombs.
Yeah. And then she's like, Ellie, don't touch that.
Yeah, it's like slightly hidden under like a dirty rag.
So she's been a part of the Fireflies now for a few weeks. Is that?
Yeah, maybe a month.
And they're already trusting her to make pipe bombs?
The only reason I'm cool with it is because the Fireflies have always come off desperate to me. Like, we don't care that she's 16. You're joining us. You're going to be a part of us. Great. Here you go. They've never, like, even in the game, they come across, I was going to say stupid, and I feel like there's a better word for it than that.
Flippant?
Maybe. Yeah, they're not as organized as I think they want you to believe.
Oh, you're talking about the Fireflies.
The Fireflies.
These two. Yeah, disorganized, I think is probably a good way of putting it.
Even, Marlene trusting Joel to come all the way. And I guess she couldn't have seen that Joel was going to build that relationship. Oh, I don't want to go too far into spoilers, but they're
They get married. No, I'm just kidding.
oh no! Don't put that juju on the show. Yeah, there's just some stuff that I always had the feeling that the Fireflies were a little more amateur than they wanted people to believe that they were.
Well, yeah, I agree.
Because they constantly fail at so many of the things that they do. And I can't remember, because they come over the radio in the second game, but are they there physically at all? Or is it just that radio communication that Abby gets with them towards the end of the game? The troll room might know. I don't know if Jen is still here, but it was one of those things that's like very weird, because they've never been like the second game almost wants to portray them as being like much more organized and better than they are.
Right.
But a lot of the actions that they take and the things that happens to them, you're like, maybe you guys weren't as good at what you're doing as you think that you are. I don't know.
What was the question? What was the question you just asked?
I can't remember if the Fireflies played a bigger role in the second game, or if it's just that radio communication that Abby has with them towards the end.
It's just that. I don't think they were
right.
Yeah, there were former members of the Fireflies that were part of the WLF, but they were the Fireflies as themselves were not in that game. So she gets that radio broadcast and wants to go there.
Yeah.
Where she believes they're going to be.
Well, we'll see when the third game comes out if she's just did you see that? That face was perfect. I need these faces. I'll give Bella Ramsey one thing. She has a lot of funny facial expressions.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh shoot! Man, that's the only problem is I got the subtitles right there. I'm gonna have to go back and find that part of the.
I don't see the subtitle on the YouTube. It's
cut off. That's why.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I can still use this then. All right, we'll try it anyway. All right, so they have these like moments. She was okay. So they have this whole thing where they're like being teenage girls, and Ellie clearly has wanted to kiss Riley for a little bit, which we can or we cannot discuss the nature of Neil Druckmann writing a story about two teenage girls finding themselves.
Yeah.
This episode, I think, could have been much more in your face about this.
Oh no, yeah, I didn't think it was done poorly at all.
I think it was the correct amount of subtle, which in a lot of ways was in the opposite of the episode with Bill.
Oh yeah.
Where it was like, oh okay. Now obviously these are like teenage girls, so it was the correct choice for him to go the direction of like they have a peck basically, and then that's about it.
Yep.
It's got that like. It was the correct choice. It was the correct choice to go in that direction. And for it to be like kind of ripped away from Ellie so quickly. So they go through this whole thing. This is like the last wonder, this Halloween shop. They put on the masks and dance awkwardly for way too long. I wasn't feeling this at all, man.
Fun story. I believe it's not the same song that they dance to in the game.
Okay.
But it is the same song. It's just in this one, it's Etta James covering the Sonny and Cher version.
Oh, gotcha.
And I could be wrong. It could both be Etta James in both, but I thought that's what I'd heard today.
Okay.
When I was going through some of my stuff.
And that could be a rights thing.
Right.
It could be as simple as that, where they wanted to try to keep it similar, but it's
they blew all their budget on all those video games in the arcade.
That's true. That Mortal Kombat
So yeah, but this is right out of the game. This whole part. Except I didn't think that they were in the Halloween store still. I thought they had gone to a different store.
I
But
don't. Yeah, I don't remember either, but I think the masks were a thing, right?
oh yeah, for sure. And you can keep the mask and wear it, for a little bit longer after you're done in the store.
Yeah.
One of the trophies was to make sure you put on all the masks.
So then we get our teenage smooch, and the infected comes out. Riley, who, and I'll again something else I'll give this show. Nobody has aimbot on. It's not. This isn't freaking Walking Dead where everyone's just headshotting.
Yeah.
100% of the time. She like bodies it a couple times, barely does anything. Gets knocked over, and is this where she gets bit? Or is it?
No, she gets bit when she tackles him, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, she got knocked out right there.
Yeah, it's sort of weird that it didn't keep going after her after that happened. Right? So like, here she is. Let me see if I can slow this down a little bit more.
They don't even like try to like subtly show where they get bit. It's just like, oh look, I'm bit.
Yeah. So she shoots him, they're running, she knocks that over. He hits her, knocks her down. Oh, maybe is Ellie's right there too, right?
Yeah, I think he was.
Oh,
going
dude, he
after
crawls.
Ellie.
But this is the thing: is he crawls away from her in that moment to specifically go after Ellie. I guess you could say that. I don't know how you would how to argue exactly how it makes more sense that the infected would have gone for Riley right there rather than Ellie. But it is what
Ellie
happened.
They needed to show Ellie's anger issues right here, though.
Okay, got you. I still really like the makeup and stuff in this. Think they do.
I was just about to say the makeup's still on point.
Yeah, I mean, this is good, man. I know that there's a lot of stuff that people don't like about the show, but I mean, at least as far as I'm concerned, the quality of a lot of the stuff that's the dressings of the show, even a lot of the location scouting that was done for this, so like where they where they decided to shoot different stuff, just works really well. Yeah, so does she get bit here?
Again,
there?
Maybe when they're
right there.
Yeah, maybe when they're like she doesn't have a bite on her arm in that shot.
In this shot, it could happen here. It's just weird though, because you'd think that getting bit on the arm would be like, because Riley's is subtle where it is on the hand, but like Ellie gets bit on the forearm like that.
Right.
But it just seems like this thing's wrestling with them the whole time.
And then here comes.
And I guess they're trying to go for that like reveal or whatever, because they don't want to let everybody know that they got bit. But like she doesn't, like Ellie doesn't even realize she got bit.
Right, and there's still like, again, if right there, you don't even see a bite on her arm.
Well, isn't it on the inside or no? It's on the outside.
It's on like the top. I thought the top of her forearm.
It's where she's got that like that fern tattoo or whatever in the sequel. Hang on, we can actually get to where the bites are and figure this out. Okay, so no, it's on her forearm.
It's like on the inside. Form. Okay,
she would have felt that, man.
Oh, for sure, you would definitely have felt it.
And maybe you could. I guess you could argue adrenaline, but I don't know. Riley got bit on the hand, and this is, I mean, practically the end of the episode. I'll admit, one of the things I thought that worked really. Oh, and this is where we get the flashbacks. It's kind of giving you this, like, Ellie is now thinking about, like, okay, she's already lost someone that she's close to. She doesn't want to lose someone that she's close to again. Oh my God, Bella Ramsey's faces, dude.
Yeah. And she just starts smashing everything. Well, Riley just knows she's gonna die. Ellie lets her anger out.
I'm sorry. This is a serious moment. I'm just yeah, but I think it works really well when you're not doing it frame by frame. Just the difference between the two of them. Yeah.
Her faces are pretty good.
Yeah. I thought the actress who played Riley did really well in this. And Riley, in a way, without realizing it, does save Ellie's life here, because she says that there are two options. They can either, the easy way, and it shows the gun,
right?
Or option two, we just keep going. And this is basically, if I remember correctly, this is right out of the game.
Yep.
Um,
They had to run from more infected, though.
Yeah.
It wasn't just one, so I think they wound up on the roof or something like that.
Yeah. It's like,
which again, you're right. This is the end of the episode. This is where it ends. We could still be seeing part of that story at some point.
But honestly, though, I kind of doubt it. Only because, but I just would have. I don't know if I would have. I know they're trying to show like the difference between these two, but I think I would have just preferred it if they had ended it after, with like Riley and Ellie rather than Joel and Ellie. Or at the very least, like Joel and Ellie's, this part of it didn't have to be quite as long as it was.
Yeah.
But again, that's more of just from me, and like I like it's kind of like the stuff that happens with Henry and Sam. In the game where it just like it cuts and then you move on to like that next thing, and it's very like jarring. I just like that. I always like those. It's like you can end on a really strong moment, and you don't have to really keep going. And if you want to show more of that, and it's episodic like this, you can just show some of that in the next episode,
right? To
wrap up some of those loose ends. But like the payoff of it just ending. With Henry taking his life, would have been great.
Yep.
But again, that's more personal preference, I think, than anything. But that's pretty much it, man. She sews him up, and next episode is the encounter with David.
Yep.
Who I'm curious about that one. I know where they're going with it. And I think it's going to be a lot less subtle than it was in the game.
Oh, for sure.
Like just cuz there's now you can correct me cuz I honestly can't quite remember, but there's like some subtlety around some of the stuff that potentially was going to happen to Ellie in that, and it wasn't just like physically hurting her.
You are correct,
but it was subtle, right? Because there's
right.
people who make that part out of the game to be like, oh, it was like very clear that was the case of what was going to happen to her, but like I'm not sure that was
for the long in the game for a while. You actually that these people are not good people,
right?
But you think David has her best intentions, like is looking out for her.
Yeah.
It's not until towards the end of the encounter that you kind of understand what his real intentions were. And so for a while it was very subtle. So we'll see, but I don't think it's going to be that subtle. Men are bad. Two more episodes at 8 and 9.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Man, they've got some ground to cover.
They have a lot of ground to cover, and
Oh, dude, I bet 9 is going to be an hour and a half.
it's definitely going to be longer. But thinking without throwing any spoilers out there, I just want to put this into your brain for you
Yeah.
to think about over the next couple weeks, right? Thinking about how much action they've taken out of the show that was in the game. How do they play that part out?
Quickly, it would be my bet.
Right? Like it is not going to have the same whatever they do, it's just not going to have the same effect.
Yeah, it's kind of where I'm
It's
at.
it's gonna be a fundamental change, I think.
Um, yeah, yeah. Well, so the plan is, so we're taking next week off.
Okay.
Maybe I can't quite. I'm not quite sure. I have to work next Monday, like late,
Mhm.
and I want at some point to do like a bigger like panel and kind of see where everybody is at the end of it. Well, I mean, I know
Yeah.
a few of the people that I want on the panel I've already kind of got an indication of how they feel about the show. Um, but I am really curious once the whole thing is done to be able to have that kind of conversation. But yeah, I don't. That's what I'm worried about, dude. Is that the show is really gonna take like a fundamental change? I mean, they've already fundamentally changed Joel.
For sure.
He is not the same character as he is in the game. He's just not. He's way more emotional, and he's having these like anxiety attacks. And that's the thing, is that it would be great to be able to hear from someone who has like no attachment to the games that likes this show, and kind of hear their thought process through it. And I know it's not over yet, and it's not as if there's not things to praise the show for. I always try to make sure that I do that with this one, because it really isn't fair to this show to be just so down on every single aspect of it. I know that fundamentally, like, if the story's not catching you, you're probably going to be done in some way or another. Or if you're a really big fan of the game and you don't like the changes that have been made, you're probably done at this point, or you're just not liking it at this point. But it doesn't take away from the fact that there is a lot of stuff that can be praised about this, even if it's just from the standpoint of like some of the creative decisions with the world are interesting, and the like I've said before, with like the makeup and set designs, and like the fact that there are these like teams that have made, whether you like some of the locations or not, have made these really incredible sets. Like the whole thing, is it Jefferson? No. Jackson, thank you. Jefferson's in California. It's a real place, but that whole thing was pretty much a set. And them having like real animals, though I don't know if you saw some of the stuff that came out about the last episode. They used a fake horse in a couple moments in that episode.
Did not see that.
Yeah, when it's pointed out, it's very obvious. I might have to grab that at some point.
I will give them the set pieces a lot of credit, and not just because of what you're saying specifically, how well that they've done them, but how well a lot of them are taken directly from the game and put to life.
Yeah.
Right. Eastern Colorado University, the university they went to, that looked, I mean, it was almost like when they made the game, they went to that college and like scanned it and put it into the game, and then they did the same thing for the show. They went to the college and filmed it there.
Yeah. Which was a great touch for sure.
Right. And so like, and it was in Jackson again. Jackson looks almost identical to the game.
Yeah.
Even though we weren't supposed to actually see it until the second game, but it's all good. It's that part doesn't really bother me.
Yeah.
But I think the set pieces and that kind of stuff, they have done great. You're right. They make them. I will say, if you go back and listen to the first episode, right, where I was like not really interested in watching this, like based on what I was hearing you guys say from the first episode. And then I think it was around like the third or fourth episode I started watching it. I haven't been utterly disappointed. Right? It has been worth watching, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There are things I don't like about it, but I think that it's a combination of I have a special place in my heart for this game, being like in my top probably 3 to 5 games of all time, and also a combination of I some of the changes that they're making just don't seem to tell a better story.
Yeah.
And I think that bugs me. But other than that, it's completely watchable. If I'd never played the game, it probably would be fine, and I probably would still have some minor issues with it. But it is what it is. It is a it is a well made show with a medium story.
Yeah, I'm kind of there. I was thinking about it, and it's always so funny when people kind of find out that I do this regularly. Or they're like, oh, you have a podcast, or oh, you do YouTube stuff, and I'm like, yeah, and then they're like, well, what do you think of this? And it's something that I like hate. Or in this instance, if people are like, well, what did you think of The Last of Us? Honestly, my response to like normal people will probably be like, yeah, it was okay. I was like, there was a lot of stuff I liked about it. There's stuff I didn't care for. That's like, that's kind of, I think, where I'm ultimately going to land on this. Though, we'll see with these last 2 episodes. This show still has a chance to just completely implode.
Oh, 100%, and I'm scared of it. I'm scared because it has the opportunity to implode, and also has the opportunity to finish strong. And maybe maybe we'll get lucky, right? Maybe we'll get lucky, and
maybe they'll bring it home, and it'll be like, all right, agree to disagree on areas, but they kept it somewhat the same. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe we'll get lucky, and they'll make a change that's actually better.
Yeah.
Right, and not terrifyingly like, oh my god, they've ruined these characters, but they make a change, it is better, and it leads to an alternate retelling of the second game that doesn't include some of the more dramatic things that happen in the beginning of the game.
I know people want that. There's no way that's not going to be almost beat for beat.
No, I'm sure.
Did you? Sorry, go ahead.
The girl at the very beginning who Bella Ramsey gets into a fight with.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of people who were like, "Is that Abby?"
Oh my gosh! You just know people have heard about Abby,
right?
And they just don't know anything about
her.
Yeah.
The funny thing is she could probably be Abby.
Yeah, dude. How are they gonna make Abby yoked?
Whoever it is gonna go hang out with Chris Hemsworth.
They're just gonna grab some like CrossFitter or whatever.
I don't know. Steroids and the carnivore diet.
Yeah, I'm really curious if they're gonna omit Abby's yokeness in the second part when it gets to like older Abby, not young Abby.
Don't get me wrong, like I didn't particularly care for that in the game, but she changes fundamentally as a character who can take care of herself if she's not that big.
Yeah.
Like unless you're able to kind of explain she's great with guns, she's great, with martial arts or something like that. You could swing that, but she is literally just a tank.
She is a tank. She's a match. Yeah, and it's just like how
she would qualify for Mrs. Olympia.
I mean, the amount of calorie intake that she would have to be having.
Oh yeah.
To get close to that. They try. If I remember correctly, I know we've talked so much about that second game during this. I know most people don't care about us trashing it, but like I think they try to play it off in the story where it's like, oh, don't you see? Like people give her their burrito rations or whatever, and that's how she was able to get the caloric intake. I'm like, no way, dude.